Welcome to Commercial Property Deep Dive by Eureka Business Group. In each episode, we break down the essentials of managing commercial properties with expert advice and actionable tips. Let's dive right in.
All right, so buckle up because today we're diving into the future. Well, the future of industrial parks, that is, right here in the DFW Metroplex.
The future of the DFW Metroplex sounds pretty grand.
It is, actually. And it all started with this article you sent me, The Future of Industrial Parks in the DFW Metroplex. And honestly, I was surprised. It's not just about boring old warehouses anymore.
Definitely not. It's really a whole new vision for these areas, like the way they're blending tech, sustainability, even community living. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to break down today. So first up, let's talk tech. The article paints this picture of industrial parks becoming super high-tech, almost futuristic.
Right. And it's not just hype. We're talking robots, AI, sensors everywhere. Like, imagine walking into a warehouse where robots are zipping around, not just moving pallets, but actually using AI to manage inventory in real time.
Wow, okay, I'm picturing that. And what about factories? Are they getting this high-tech makeover too?
Oh, absolutely. Think sensors on every machine, feeding data into a central system, so they can predict maintenance needs, prevent breakdowns, that kind of thing.
That's wild. So it's not just replacing human jobs, it's like making those jobs smarter,
Right.
more efficient.
Exactly. And, it's creating new jobs too. You need people to program those robots, analyze the data, keep everything running smoothly.
Makes sense. So it's like a whole new skill set that's needed in these industrial parks now.
It is, and it's attracting a different kind of workforce to these areas. Like, you're seeing tech workers alongside the more traditional blue-collar jobs.
It's interesting how the lines are blurring, right? When most people think industrial park, they don't think high-tech.
Right, but that perception is rapidly changing, and companies, big ones like Amazon and FedEx, but also smaller local manufacturers, they're all realizing they need to embrace this tech to stay competitive.
Okay, so we've got robots and AI taking over the warehouses and factories. But what about the buildings themselves? The article talks a lot about sustainability.
Yes, and this is where it gets really cool. It's not just about minimizing environmental impact. It's about actually using these parks as catalysts for positive change.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What does that look like in practice?
Well, for example, a lot of developers are now aiming for A-LEED certification for their buildings.
Ah, A-LEED certification. I've heard that thrown around, but refresh my memory. What does that actually involve?
Basically, it's a whole set of standards for environmentally friendly building practices. It covers everything from energy efficiency to water conservation, sustainable materials, even indoor air quality.
So it's like a holistic approach to making these buildings green.
Exactly. And it's not just about being eco-conscious. It's actually a smart business decision in the long run. Like a LEED certified building, it uses less energy, generates less waste. It could even save businesses money on operating costs.
I see. So it's like a win-win. It's good for the planet and good for the bottom line.
Exactly. And it's becoming a big selling point for DFW. Companies know that today's workforce cares about sustainability, so having a green work environment helps attract and retain top talent.
Yeah, absolutely. People want to work for companies that align with their values.
Right. And it's influencing the development of entire industrial zones. Like, it's not just individual buildings anymore, it's about creating whole ecosystems designed for sustainability.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The article talks about these industrial parks becoming mixed-use spaces. So not just warehouses and factories, but also offices, shops, even apartments.
Yeah, exactly. That's a huge shift from the traditional model.
It is. And I'm curious, is that actually happening here in DFW? Or is that more like a futuristic idea?
Oh, it's happening. We're seeing a real blurring of the lines between industrial, residential, and commercial zones.
Yeah.
Like, developers are creating these multifunctional spaces where people can live, work, shop, even play, all in one place.
So wait, you're saying I could potentially live in an industrial park someday?
Well, potentially, yeah. And it makes sense if you think about it. People are looking for that live work, play lifestyle, reducing commute times, having everything they need close by.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a more sustainable way to live, too.
Exactly. And for businesses, having their employees living closer to work, that's a huge plus. Less commute time means less stress, more productivity.
So it sounds like it's driven by this desire for convenience and also a desire for community, for that sense of connection.
Right. And by mixing everything together, you create this built-in customer base for local businesses. So it strengthens the local economy and fosters a sense of community.
It's like creating a little ecosystem. But hold on, doesn't mixing industrial activities with residential areas raise some concerns? Like, what about noise pollution and traffic?
It can. But that's where careful planning and community engagement are key. Like you might have buffer zones, noise-reducing landscaping, specific guidelines for traffic flow, things like that.
So it's not just throwing everything together, it's about thoughtful design,
Right.
making sure the different uses can actually coexist.
Exactly. And when it's done well, it's a win-win for businesses and the community as a whole.
Okay, so far we've covered high-tech features, sustainability, and this whole mixed-use concept. What other big trends are shaping the future of DFW industrial parks?
Well, one that's closely tied to all of this is the need for flexibility.
Flexibility, you mean like yoga classes for stressed-out warehouse workers?
Uh-huh. Not quite. I mean, the buildings themselves need to be flexible. In the past, they were often designed for a very specific purpose, like a warehouse was a warehouse, a factory was a factory.
Yeah, very compartmentalized.
Right. But now, with the way business is constantly changing, companies need spaces that can adapt to different needs.
Makes sense. Companies are always scaling up, scaling down,
Yeah.
pivoting their strategies.
Exactly. So these new, flexible spaces, they need to be adaptable.
So like buildings that are almost like blank canvases ready to be customized.
Kind of, yeah. Think of it like Lego blocks. You can rearrange them, add or remove components, whatever you need.
Okay, so that's flexibility in terms of layout. But what about the actual infrastructure of the building?
That needs to be adaptable too. Like you need things like open floor plans, movable walls, adaptable power and data connections. Even things like high ceilings and large loading docks can make a big difference.
So it's about anticipating future needs, even if you don't know exactly what those needs will be.
Exactly. And it's being driven by so many factors: e-commerce, the rise of complex supply chains, and just the general need for businesses to be agile, to react quickly to whatever comes their way.
So flexibility is no longer a nice to have, it's a must have.
Absolutely. And it's really changing the game for how industrial parks are being designed and developed here in DFW.
All right, we've talked tech, sustainability, mixed use development, now flexibility. It's a lot to take in.
It is. And there's one more crucial element we need to talk about: location.
Okay, back to the real estate basics. Location, location, location. But DFW is already known for its great transportation network, right?
It is, but it's about taking that even further, especially within these parks.
I see. So it's not just about being near highways, it's about how things move within the park itself.
Right. Think about it. In the past, you'd have a truck picking up goods from a warehouse, driving across town to a distribution center, then heading out to its final destination. Now the goal is to create a much smoother flow of goods.
So it's like optimizing every step of the journey.
Exactly. Like having dedicated truck lanes within the park to reduce congestion, or intermodal facilities where goods can easily be transferred between trucks, trains, even planes.
It's almost like these industrial parks are becoming like mini cities, designed for the efficient movement of goods.
That's a good way to put it. And some are even incorporating drone delivery hubs and autonomous vehicle lanes.
Wow, it sounds like the future of logistics is being played out right here in DFW.
It really is. And it's all made possible by this combination of strategic location, innovative infrastructure, and that relentless focus on efficiency.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from robots and AI to sustainable buildings, mixed-use development, flexibility, and now this focus on location. It seems like everything's connected, right?
It is. It's like all these trends are feeding off each other, creating this new ecosystem for industrial development.
And it's fascinating to see DFW at the forefront of all this. But before we go too far down that road, I want to pause here.
Sure.
What stood out to you the most so far about this whole new breed of industrial park? Okay, so we've established these aren't your grandpa's industrial parks anymore. We're talking high-tech, sustainable, mixed-use hubs. But what I'm really curious about is how all this translates into actual economic impact for the DFW area.
Right. Yeah, that's the key question. And it's where things get really exciting.
Right.
Traditionally, industrial development was all about creating blue-collar jobs, boosting manufacturing, that sort of thing.
Right, the old school image.
Exactly. And while those are still important, the economic impact of these new industrial parks, it goes way beyond that.
The article mentioned attracting a more diverse range of businesses. Can you talk about that a little more?
Absolutely. Think about it. What kind of companies are drawn to these high-tech, sustainable spaces? It's not just manufacturers anymore. You've got Logistics companies needing cutting-edge distribution centers, tech firms setting up data centers and research labs.
So it's not just about making stuff anymore, it's about moving it, thinking about it.
Exactly. And even companies in renewable energy, they're building solar farms, wind turbine assembly plants, all sorts of things.
It sounds like a whole new ecosystem is emerging.
It is. And that diversification, that's key to making the DFW economy more resilient.
I see. So it's like in the past, if one industry struggled, the whole region could feel it.
Right, exactly. But now with a wider range of businesses, the economy is less vulnerable to those ups and downs in any single sector.
Makes sense. It's like having a diversified investment portfolio, right? Spreading the risk.
Exactly. And this diversification also translates into a wider range of job opportunities for people in DFW.
Yeah, we touched on this earlier, but I'm really curious to hear more about the types of jobs being created in these new parks.
Well, it's a fascinating mix. You still have the traditional blue-collar jobs in manufacturing and logistics, of course, but there's this growing demand for skilled technicians, engineers, data analysts, software developers, even researchers.
Wow, so it's a pretty wide spectrum.
It is, and those are high-paying, high-skill jobs. They attract top talent from all over.
So it's not just about creating more jobs, it's about creating better jobs.
Exactly. And those higher-paying jobs lead to increased spending power, which stimulates the local economy even further. It's a positive feedback loop.
It sounds almost too good to be true. But let's be realistic, all this innovation, it comes at a cost. How are these projects even getting funded? The article mentioned challenges in attracting investment.
Yeah, funding is always a challenge, especially for projects that are kind of pushing the envelope like these. There's a certain level of risk involved, right? Investing in something new and untested.
I can imagine. Investors might be hesitant to pour money into something with robots, solar panels, mixed-use development all at once. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. And that's why it's so important to have a clear vision, a solid business plan, and strong partnerships.
What do you mean by strong partnerships?
Well, you need the right mix of players at the table. Developers with experience in building this kind of thing, investors who see the long-term potential, local governments who can offer incentives and maybe streamline some regulations.
So it's not enough to just have a cool idea. You need the right team to actually make it happen.
Exactly. And you need to be able to demonstrate a return on investment. Investors want to see that these projects will generate profit, create jobs, really contribute to the community.
So how are developers making that case? What are they saying to these investors?
They're using data, case studies from other successful projects to show that these investments aren't just good for the environment or the community, they're also good for business.
I see. So proving that sustainability and profitability can go hand in hand.
Exactly. They're highlighting the cost savings from energy efficiency and automation, the increased productivity that comes with a healthier and happier workforce, even things like enhanced property values.
So it's about painting a picture of this holistic win-win scenario.
It is. And it seems like that message is starting to resonate.
That's encouraging. But let's not sugarcoat things. Are there any potential downsides, any risks associated with this transformation of industrial parks?
Well, of course, there are always risks with any major shift in development. And one of the big challenges with these mixed-use industrial parks is managing potential conflicts between the different uses.
Yeah, the article touched on that, mentioning possible pushback from residents concerned about things like noise pollution, increased traffic.
Right. And those are valid concerns. It's not always easy to mix heavy industrial activity with residential and commercial areas.
So how are developers addressing those concerns?
Well, first and foremost, it's about transparency and communication. They need to be upfront with residents about what they're planning, how they're going to mitigate any negative impacts.
So lots to community meetings, open dialogue, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And conducting environmental impact studies, creating clear guidelines for things like noise levels and traffic flow. It's about building trust.
So it sounds like a lot of careful planning and collaboration goes into making these mixed-use projects work.
It does. And it's not always easy, but when it's done well, the benefits are enormous for everyone. You create a more vibrant, diverse community, you generate economic activity, and it's a much more sustainable model for urban development.
It's interesting because traditionally, industrial areas were seen as these kind of isolated zones, separate from the rest of the city.
Yeah, almost like a forgotten corner.
Right, but now it seems like there's this shift towards integrating them into the fabric of the community.
Exactly. And that's a really positive trend. By breaking down those barriers, we can create more connected and inclusive communities where people from all walks of life can live, work, and thrive together.
I love that vision. But it's not just about attracting people to these areas, it's also about attracting and retaining businesses, right? What are developers doing to ensure these new industrial parks are competitive in the long run?
Well, they're realizing it's not just about functionality and efficiency anymore. They're focusing on creating spaces that are also attractive, inspiring. Think about modern office buildings downtown, with their fitness centers, rooftop gardens, collaborative workspaces.
Yeah, those trendy perks.
Exactly. And we're starting to see those same principles applied to industrial parks now. Green spaces, walking trails, maybe even on-site childcare, food trucks, outdoor concert venues, things that create a more appealing work environment.
So it's about creating a sense of place, right? Not just a place to work, but a place to be.
Exactly. It's about fostering a sense of community, a sense of pride.
We've covered a lot of ground here. Economic benefits, job creation, community engagement, long-term competitiveness. It's a lot to process. What stands out to you the most about all this?
All right, so we've been talking big picture trends, but now let's bring it down to earth a bit. This article you sent me, it actually highlights some real-world examples of these futuristic industrial parks right here in DFW.
Yeah, and these aren't just ideas on paper. These are projects that are actually happening, transforming the landscape.
So give us the rundown. What kind of projects are we talking about?
Well, one that really stands out is this development in the Alliance, Texas corridor. It's a massive mixed-use industrial park that's really pushing the limits.
Alliance, Texas, that's already a huge player in the DFW scene, right? What makes this project so special? It's the sheer scale and ambition of it. It's not just a few warehouses and office buildings thrown together. It's a whole integrated community. Industrial facilities, office spaces, retail, residential units, even parks and green spaces, all designed to work together seamlessly.
So it's like a mini city within a city.
That's a great way to put it. And it's all built with sustainability in mind. They're using solar panels, rainwater harvesting systems, even recycled materials in the construction.
They're really going all in on this, huh?
Yeah, they're trying to create a model for the future of industrial development. And it's attracting a lot of interest from businesses, especially those looking for a location that's sustainable and forward-thinking.
I can see why. It's a good look for companies, shows they're aligned with those values that people care about these days.
Exactly. And it's creating a real buzz here in DFW. It shows the kind of innovative spirit that's driving the region's growth.
Okay, so that's one example. What else is out there? What other projects are catching your eye?
Well, there's this redevelopment project in South Dallas, an older industrial area. And what's interesting about this one is that it's focused on revitalizing an existing community, not just building something brand new.
That's a really important distinction, I think. We hear so much about gentrification, new development, pushing out existing residents. It sounds like this project is trying to avoid that.
They are. They're working very closely with the community to make sure the development benefits everyone. Things like workforce training programs, affordable housing options, community gardens. They're incorporating all of that.
So it's not just about bringing in new businesses. It's about empowering the people who are already there.
Exactly. And it's creating this really cool mix of old and new. You've got these historic industrial buildings being repurposed and then new construction that's designed to fit in with the existing architecture.
It sounds like a really thoughtful approach to urban renewal.
It is. And it shows how these trends we've been talking about, they can be used to create positive change, not just for businesses, but for whole communities.
So we have these large-scale ambitious projects like the one in Alliance, Texas, and then these more community-focused projects like the one in South Dallas. It seems like there's a real diversity of approaches happening in DFW.
Yeah, there is. And that's one of the things that makes it such an exciting place to be right now. There's this energy, this willingness to experiment, to push the boundaries.
So taking a step back, what does all this mean for the future? What's the big takeaway for someone listening to this, trying to make sense of these trends?
I think the key takeaway is that industrial development, it's not just about warehouses and factories anymore. It's about creating vibrant, sustainable, inclusive communities, places where people want to live, work, and play.
It's about moving away from that old image of industrial parks as these isolated, purely functional zones and making them part of the fabric of our cities.
Exactly. And DFW is really leading the charge in this transformation. All the pieces are in place: the technology, the strong economy, the growing population, the commitment to sustainability. It's creating this perfect storm for a new era of industrial development.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from high-tech robots to green buildings, mixed-use communities, all of it. It's clear the industrial landscape is changing rapidly, And it seems like DFW is right at the heart of that change.
It's been a great conversation. I hope our listeners are as excited about the future of these areas as we are.
And for anyone listening who's thinking about the future of their business, their community, what would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind?
I'd say be open to new ideas. Don't be afraid to challenge the way things have always been done. And look for opportunities to collaborate, to work together, to create something better.
That's great advice. We can't just keep doing things the same old way. We need to embrace change, and we need to do it together.
Absolutely. And I think the future of industrial development is a perfect example of how we can do just that.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap things up here, but this is just the beginning of the conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your own observations about these trends we've been discussing.
So keep exploring, keep learning, keep diving deep.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the topics that are shaping the world around us.
Thanks for tuning in to Commercial Property Deep Dive by Eureka Business Group. We hope you enjoyed today's insights. Don't forget to subscribe for more expert tips and real stories to help you navigate the world of commercial property management. Until next time, keep thriving.